Alrighty, gang. Here's to nights that turn into mornings and friends that turn into family. Cheers!
Happy birthday to you.
Hello. Welcome to the Friendship IRL podcast. I'm your host, Alex Alexander, and each week we explore what's working and what's not in our friendships, community, and connections. Have you ever wished you could sit down and have a conversation about what is really going on in your friendships? Well, you found your people. Join us as we dive into real-life stories and explore new ways to approach these connections. Together, we're reimagining the rules of friendship.
Today's episode is going to be a fun one because it is somebody that I know in real life. Like, who knows me? I feel like you guys always really love these episodes where I interview a friend of mine. And today, my friend is Brendan Smith. Brendan is a member of the Toastmasters Club. You probably heard me mention Toastmasters many a time on the podcast, but he is another member of this club. I've been a part of this club for 4 years. Now, if you don't know what Toastmasters is, it's a little nerdy. It's an international speaking club. It's an educational organization. They say that they teach people public speaking and leadership skills. And there are clubs all over the world. If that's something that interests you, you can definitely check one out in your area. And there are plenty of virtual options. Now, you've heard me talk about this concept of formal community before. And if you haven't, you can listen to it in episode 100. But formal community is basically any group that you belong to that meets regularly, that gives you kind of this sense of belonging. But feeling like you belong anywhere takes a little bit of time. I mean, I think for me, it probably took at least about 6 months. You'll hear me talk about that in today's episode. Joining Toastmasters was something I had wanted to do for a very, very, very long time. And maybe you have something like that. Maybe you have a running club or a sports group or a local community organization that you've thought about joining, but you're nervous. Because what is it like when you go? You don't know how to act or what everybody's about to do. You don't know anybody who's there. That's probably a telltale sign of formal community, by the way. So I put it off. I put it off for years. And I finally got over it. I finally went to my first meeting. And when I showed up, Brendan was there. I'm really excited to have you listen to the two of us just chat about our experiences in this club, dealing with different personalities, what it's like to start to feel comfortable, and so much more. I don't need to tell you. Let's just dive in.
Hi, Brendan. I am very excited that you are here on the podcast, that you have heard me talk quite a bit about in person.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to get famous. Really looking forward to it.
To get famous. I feel like we need to tell everybody out there how we know each other. We both showed up at the same place at the same time. We were newbies in a group space. That's my like hook for everybody. Brendan and I are in the same Toastmasters club. We joined at the same time.
And at a memorable time because it was literally the week before everything shut down for COVID.
Yes. I mean, it was a wild time. How many times had you gone as a guest like that night before everything shut down?
So that was my first time as a guest for our club. Yeah. So that was the first and only time I saw people from that club in person for what ended up being a long time.
Yes. We ended up meeting online for a very long time, which I think you and I can both agree is a really hard way to meet people in those like big group Zoom meetings where only one person can really talk at a time.
Yes. I mean, I still felt like I ended up getting to know certain people's personalities through those Zoom talks and even developing somewhat of my own in them. Definitely once we got back to in person, the interactions were a lot more fun and you got to know people a lot better and feel a lot more, I think, comfortable and yourself around people once they were back to in person.
I would agree with that. I mean, we met online for what, 2 years?
Must have been 2022, like right after July 4th picnic in 2022, I think, was the first time we went back to in person.
So that means that you and I hung out online every Thursday for what, 2 years and like 4 months?
That's like 100 weeks of like 2-hour meetings. It's like 200 hours.
Okay, so I have a real question for you. I don't think I've ever asked you this before. When you first joined, were you excited to show up at the weekly meetings? I'll explain. When we had to switch to online, I dreaded the online virtual meeting every week. I liked all the people, so I would show up, but the online format and not knowing people very well, every week I was like, I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit. But I didn't, and I'm still here.
No. I mean, for me, I think it was different. I try not to be too creepy, but it was always entertaining for me to like see what everyone's houses look like, behind them.
So true.
It kept things interesting. But I wouldn't say like there was nothing about it being online that rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, I always found it really convenient. Sometimes I'm running late or I tend to run late. So this made it really convenient just to turn on Zoom and then I was there.
That makes sense. I get that. I mean, you live a little ways from the meeting. I only live like a 2-minute drive. So I haven't really felt like it's that different, except that I guess I maybe put makeup on to go. Like that might be the only difference for me. You were a part of another Toastmasters club before this one, right?
Yeah, I moved from Connecticut and there was a town called West Hartford. They had a small club, or there were like 20 people at the meeting. So they had a sizable club, dedicated group.
And you did that for a while. So when you then moved to Seattle, like how long had you lived here before you decided to join our club?
So I got to Seattle in mid-January of 2020. Basically joined our club at like mid-March 2020. I mean, before that, I was attending this other club for probably like mid-February, and I think they were in Capitol Hill, so not as close to me where our Toastmasters club is. It just took me a little bit to find it on a map, I would say. So I moved to Seattle. I was looking for a Toastmasters group because I did like the club I was in Connecticut, and I knew I wanted to get better at communication. So I was searching for a Toastmaster group. I just think the first one that originally came up was not the best fit for me. And then I found our one, and kind of as soon as I stepped in, just the variety of people that were there made me know it was like the right one.
That is one of my favorite things about our club too, is the variety of people. Without giving away like, I don't know, weird details about all of our Toastmasters friends. Our club has, well, I mean, you're president. How many members do we have? I always say like 35, 40.
So we just came up on renewals. I don't know where we're at after renewals, but I mean, 44 was the last count.
Okay.
And that was up from, well, like when we started, I think membership was consistently like low 20s, mid 20s. And then all of a sudden, when we started meeting back in person, or I think actually, especially like in the past 6 months, it's just shot up. Meanwhile, like all these other clubs, their membership is declining.
Oh, I mean, I'm going to give you kudos for that. You have been president 2 of the 4 years we've been in the club. So membership skyrocketing. Obviously, it's all because of, your leadership.
No, well, I think it's just like our club, like it's a fun group of people. I can't think of any other clubs or groups that I've ever been in that have as wide a variety of people in them, which I think really just attracts everyone. Like whenever we ask people, like what interests you about this club, it's like warm and welcoming everyone is, but also, yeah, how different everyone is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So I was saying we were nodding to the variety of people we have in the club. I mean, we have people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, like all the way up until I think their 80s.
You had people in the teens last
Oh,
week.
we did. We had a young, spry potential Toastmaster show up. He was very excited. But yeah, I mean, we have people spanning so many decades, men and women, people in a variety of career fields, people from all over the world. I mean, we have members from, Colombia, Brazil, China, India,
Africa.
Kenya, I mean, Canada. It's a joke, joking. But I mean, we have had Canadian members. The UK. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else in my time in Toastmasters from any other countries. But I mean, we're spanning pretty much all the continents. Mexico.
Yeah.
We've got a good number of people from all over the world. That's one of my favorite parts of Toastmasters too, is just the variety of people we see each week.
Yeah. To me, it's just the variety of communication styles. Like when I went in, I was wanting to become a really good communicator. I didn't even know what that meant, really, how I could become one. That's what's really fun about us. You're exposed to a lot of people who are good at delivering a speech in different ways. Sometimes it's something that you really like and you're like, oh, I think I could emulate that myself. Sometimes it's like, well, it's just doesn't fit with my natural style, so I can just appreciate it. But that's fun. You get to like pick and choose styles based on what other people do and really learn to choose and be intentional about developing your own style.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's just really inspiring. I mean, I think the styles, but also people's interests, right? You never know what you're going to learn about every week when you show up. Thinking back, I can think of a meeting where I learned about vintage typewriters, fountain pens.
Oh, yeah.
Video game design.
Or, yeah, how Nintendo was started, how cans are made. Yeah, you learn something new every weekend.
Something new every week, which is so cool because you get to, all these people we're in a room with, we almost get to learn about like their most niche interests, which just adds so much color to like who they are as a person.
Yeah.
Which I think is fun.
And I think it's a very vulnerable place, and not in a way that's like encourages you to be vulnerable, but people open themselves up and it's not in like a cringy way at all. Yeah, you feel like you really know them, and yeah, you see like another layer to them, and that's my favorite part. Is kind of seeing someone talk and learning more about them, and then reflecting on back to like when you first met them and you didn't know them at all, and how different they are now. It's just so weird.
When you were saying not cringy at all, what came to mind was Toastmasters is such a place of growth that it's vulnerable to grow, and it's vulnerable to like try things new and fail and have, I don't know, a bad speech or a bad night or a bad whatever. And that's what makes it so open, is people are like publicly failing on a stage week after week. And sometimes you succeed and everyone's like, wow, that was so good. But more often than not, there's some sort of feedback.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's an environment where there's only an upside, really. You learn to just be like okay with failing. I think a lot of us we have busy lives. We mean to prepare for speeches. We can't. And then we just didn't have enough time. And then we present and we fall on our face or something. But you kind of learn how to just move on to the next thing. It's really, there's no repercussions to not doing well. No one really cares that much. They're just happy to see you speak the next time. And again, you try again, and then maybe next time, then it's a really good one. And then, okay, that's great. It's awesome that we've created an environment where it doesn't matter if you fail. And then it's awesome if you succeed.
Often I feel like there's a lot of focus on vulnerability as this idea of like sitting face to face maybe or side by side and sharing. talking, telling stories. You heard me talk about this recently in my episode with James Richardson. But I think there's so much vulnerability in doing. We learn so much about people when we are experiencing things together. So in this Toastmasters group, we are failing regularly. And that's vulnerable. Like, when is the last time that you, as an adult, failed publicly? Maybe you learned a new sport, or you taught yourself a new skill when you were with a friend. Maybe you learned to cook at the age of 38 and a bunch of people in your family witnessed it. As kids, we were constantly witnessing our friends fail, get in trouble, get reprimanded by their parents and grounded. Like, this was so common to see our friends go through this. So if you are somebody who has gotten into the pattern of sharing stories, then I might urge you to go out there and try getting vulnerable with someone by doing and allowing someone to witness your growth. This could be a close friend. It could be a formal community. It could be family. But I really think we all need to develop this skill set as adults, because not failing by doing, always needing to learn on your own in this controlled environment, I think it holds us back from a lot of opportunities to connect with people around us.
So we have highlighted so many of what we see as the positive parts of being a part of a community, like a community club, organization. You and I, offline after Toastmasters meetings, have talked about what I'm about to ask you about. And I feel like you have just a really good take on it, which is the frustrations people can feel when there are differing personalities, or you feel challenged in how to relate to people in a group where, maybe you didn't like curate it and people are very different. You know what I'm talking about? We've talked about this before. Like, when personalities clash, I feel like you have a really good take on that. Can you share a little bit?
I like it when there's clashes. I think it's healthy to an extent. I think when everything is just everyone just agrees and doesn't put you outside your comfort zone, it's nice, but there's a big upside in my belief that, like, the whole, like, I don't want to say clashing, but so much as just trying to see eye to eye with someone different and working through things with someone else who's different or who maybe initially irritates you a little bit. When you get through that, or any sort of experience that's tough in the moment, it's not pleasant, but at the end of it, it's kind of like that release of tension that feels good. It's like meaningful. If everything was in our club was everyone agrees and it's just nice, there's no sort of like small little tension that you overcome, then it's, I don't know, I just don't think it would mean as much to people. And to me, and all the clubs and communities I've been part of that I've been really emotionally attached to, I think I've realized it's come with that going through adversity, some sort of adversity with those people or through those people. To me, it reminds me of when I ran cross country in high school and track, and so many teammates I had that were very different personalities than me that I don't think I would have really talked to that much or been that fond of if I hadn't gone through all those cross country practices where literally I almost ran myself to death and was kept myself from breathing for like half an hour straight. Like, when you go through those experiences with people, it bonds you to them. Same thing with our club in Toastmasters, I think, where you are in an environment where people are doing something vulnerable, going outside their comfort zone, that attaches you to them. But also, like, maybe someone says something that you're like, I don't know, it kind of rubs me the wrong way. But then, you talk it out with them. if that needs to happen, or you just work through it with them. And that's, to me, I think is a much more meaningful group of people than one that's just always seeing eye to eye and always just never pushing anyone outside their comfort zone.
It just makes me think that, like, listening to you say that, it's such a growth mindset in a good way, right? It's not you maybe versus the other person who said the thing that made you be like, "Arr!" It's not like you versus them. It is, we are in this club and we will both feel good if on the other side we can like talk this out and learn something new and remain open and remain curious. And like, I'll be the first to admit, I think that's hard in a group setting. I think so often you go to a group, a lot of people, I think, select groups where like every single person has, for the most part, like similar values or beliefs. When you come together around an interest like public speaking, that room is filled with people with all sorts of opinions and experiences. It's not curated because, as you're saying, we all believe the same thing. We all just like getting up on stage.
I agree. And when you say that, it makes me think of like, because the thing that we're all coming together on is like learning how to communicate better, learn how to be more comfortable speaking in front of people. But it kind of creates an environment where you're going to have the most variance in the group of people based on that interest. Because any other interest, I think people will be a lot more similar. If it's a hobby or something, I think they tend to be a lot more similar. But like when you're all coming together for public speaking, number one, I think you get people a lot more variance, but also you don't know what the other person's going to say. There's a lot more openness to kind of the platform and what people could say, and then what effect that has on someone else who's different, like that, like the dynamic that is created from that in the club, where just everyone's just so different. It's like the Amazon rainforest as opposed to, I'm thinking about the woods in my backyard in Massachusetts, where not as much diversity in like the species.
Yeah, if I think of like a run club, for example, right? A lot of people probably are very overall into fitness. They're very potentially, I'm not saying, but like probably very into nutrition. They are probably outside a lot. Like you're going in with a lot of the same values of how you structure your day to day in your life, I think, in certain groups, not every group, but like in certain groups. And yeah, we just don't have that. And then I think you add in the additional layer that because we're all getting up there and giving speeches about our niche interests and beliefs and things like that in a run club, it's a little less likely somebody's going to get up there and give a super polarizing speech in the middle of run club the way somebody might in Toastmasters, because our whole 2-hour meeting every week centers around like getting up there and talking. And as people who have been in the club, I don't know about you, for 4 years, you got to get kind of creative at this point with what we're talking about, because like otherwise we're just telling the same stories every week. So you start to really get into like some niche information about people.
Yeah, but I think we do a good job on it. And also to the point of like when you're in groups of like-minded people, you know how like when you eat a lot of sugar, it just, you get more and more energy. It just builds on itself really quickly, and it just, you end up getting like huge sugar crash. I think relationships that you find in like those like-minded groups can kind of be like that, where you, initially you have this shared interest, and then relationship skyrockets, and then eventually it just, you inevitably get in a fight with someone or something, and it just, I don't know, I feel like they end up being a little bit more flaky, my opinion. But then I think it's a healthier relationship where it just kind of starts off as like seemingly like you have nothing in common. Like when we go to Toastmasters, I think we forget that the one thing that we probably all have in common is we're learning how to public speak or become better public speakers. And so the way that the relationships form just is a lot more natural. For example, when I'm just thinking about being in a running group, it's, I don't know, you just meet people and it's, I guess it's natural. You both love the sport, so it's easy for you to go from there. But I just think there's something different when a relationship develops over a period of time. And then all of a sudden you go from kind of knowing them for a while and then to, oh, really liking them. Like you and I remember talking to you the first time, that first meeting, and well, I thought you were like really shy.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I was like, what are you about to tell me? I don't know if I've heard this story, but you have told me this. Okay, keep going. Everybody on this listening on the podcast is probably going to laugh that somebody thought I was shy. So like, please keep going.
Oh yeah, really shy. But then the next meeting, then you chose to speak already. And so already you made me feel like way behind the eight ball because you were already giving speeches. But then you gave this like really intense, motivating speech about your time on crew, and you had this like energy that was very like commandeering, and I was really taken aback. I was like, I did not see that in that person. Now, since then, it's like we joke all the time. Now, flash forward 4 years, it took kind of I don't know, I don't even remember when we started talking that much, but it was just, after going to Toastmasters repeatedly, and then all of a sudden, I think it was probably like when we started going back to in-person meetings. I like that where you are in settings where you can just, it takes a while to meet people, and it's good. It takes a while for the relationship to develop. And that's like not generally present, I think, in a lot of the ways we meet people now, because we meet people on apps and so much is already like curated. So you already know what you're going to talk about. And then kind of the relationship just goes from there. I think it just has an effect on the kind of the relationships you end up having, which, some of them are good, great. But I think, sometimes there's something nice and old school about, when you meet someone just like in a coffee shop or in just like a normal environment that just took a while for that like friendship to develop.
That is so, I think about friendship a lot, as you know. I have never thought about that aspect, which is that when you meet somebody online, you might be messaging back and forth, but if you don't know what to respond, you can just not respond for a little bit. You can just put your phone down and be like, oh, sorry, I was busy, like while you're thinking of your response. When you meet in person, you can't really do that. I mean, you can, but for the most part, you're right. We have to like come up with questions to ask each other and figure it out like on the fly and fumble your way through it. That's an interesting difference.
I remember so when I first got to Seattle, and, I was single when I moved here, and so much of my interactions were on like the phone, and you could feel like it's been said 100 times, you could feel like you're a words craftsman, but then when you met them in person, it was just so different, because all of a sudden you're just talking in person. So the way what you say is different.
I mean, your story is so great, Brendan, for anybody who's listening, right? Because like you have to remember, people that listen to this podcast, some of them have listened to like 100 hours of me talking. I am pretty extroverted once you get to know me. But I talk on here about how like I also experience social anxiety when I meet someone for the first time, and you have to like psych yourself up a little bit to go in the room. Now here you are being like, yeah, I thought she was really shy, because that's like how I handle that social anxiety in person. I have a question I've been holding on to for a while now that I want to know. So you moved here. You had previously been in a Toastmasters club. You decided to go out and try out a couple. Did you join Toastmasters just because you liked the club, or were you specifically looking to use it as a way to meet people since you just moved your whole life across the country?
It's one of those things where it's like, who knows? When I was looking for a new Toastmasters group, what I thought it was very much I wanted to become a better communicator, and not so much for any like social reason. I knew some people like to do it as their like social outlet, but at least what I thought I was doing at the time, it wasn't for that reason. But it was like recently where I was delivering a speech that was where I was reflecting on Toastmasters, and what I was like realized was that what totally kept me coming back to the club now was that the community, like the group. And I definitely had put back on the back burner of like, okay, developing my communication skills. I realized if I was really coming to Toastmasters because I wanted to be a better communicator, I'd probably be practicing more while not at the meetings, but I really wasn't. But I still was very consistent about attending our weekly meetings. And what kept me coming, I think, was just I've never been in a group of as mixed people as our club. It's like really healthy for me to be around that. I had other friends outside Toastmasters and friends I enjoyed being around that were funny, that go on trips with, that were fun. But, there's something different about people who are just like different, like veggies versus sugar and dessert.
There's like a vibe about the club too. And we were talking about this. I don't know if every Toastmasters club has this, but I think to guests, to people that come and visit our club, it is very evident. I think most people would say from the first meeting, like we're all very friendly, we're very welcoming. We like make it a point to, if you ever see somebody who's new standing in the corner, somebody will go talk to them. And if you can't talk to them, you're like, I'm making eye contact to you who's not talking to anyone, being like, the guest is over there. Like I'm stuck in this conversation with so-and-so at the moment. So like you go talk to them. Like I think you can feel how welcoming it is. And then once you're actually ingrained in it, I would agree with you. I mean, the thing I look forward to the most is seeing people every week. Even if it's just for those little like, how was your week? Did you go on that trip? Did you do this thing? It's not like I know the deepest facts about everybody, but I have some sense of kind of what's going on in everybody's life, which I think is nice.
One of the other things I like about it is, this may be silly, but we have a snack time. And there's something about having food with someone else that ends up making a lot of relationships a lot better. I mean, it just opens you up more, especially going from like very vulnerable, uncomfortable when we start off our meetings with like the prepared speech section of the meeting. People are delivering 5-7 minute speeches in front of 20 people. Sometimes they're uncomfortable. You can feel their discomfort. Okay, but then you move on to snack time, and then it's just everyone starts eating and talking and having a good time again. And then we go back to the next section of the meeting where we're doing like the impromptu, and again, going back to that discomfort, but the whole, I like to call it breaking bread, or just eating with someone. Something about that's like so human and ends up making you so much more open to another person and someone who's different than you. And then allowing that like relationship to like form and to you to actually care about that person.
Nobody's able to see me when they listen to this episode, but I'm smiling so big over here because I feel like you've just spent so much time thinking about the things that matter to you about Toastmasters, and I love it. I also love snack time. I have never thought about why, but I think you're right. So often in a group setting, because our meeting is so structured, the only other time we'd have to say hi to people is when people arrive or people leave, and people are either like late or in a rush. So it's not really dependable, but that like 15 minutes, it's not even that long sometimes, is so dependable. And you're right. If somebody just shared something or they totally messed up, you hear all these people in the room being like, that was great. You're going to get it next time. Here's how to improve that. I really appreciated that share. Like whatever it is, you can like hear that.
Yeah. And I don't even think it's so like the way I experience it is like we're all moving on to snack time.
Yeah.
If you mess up, no one cares anymore because there's food. But if someone did really do well, it kind of sticks with you and you're like, wow, I actually want to go up and say how much better I thought that was than anything I've seen them do before. That creates like that environment where it doesn't matter if you fail, and then there's a huge upside if you do well.
Yeah. Now I'm going to appreciate snack time on a whole new level tomorrow night. I've mentioned this a couple times, you've been president now for 2 years of the 4 that we've been in the club together. Thank you, by the way. He's been president twice, guys, because I literally couldn't be president this year with work. So Brendan stepped in for me. So thank you for that. But do you think that being in leadership has made you feel even more connected to the club?
Well, in a way, like, because it's changed my perspective on leadership. And this is what my speech was about, where I was reflecting on why I did Toastmasters. That I do think when I took the president role, it was okay. I thought there was a great club community. No one really wanted to take it, right? Everyone's busy. So, okay, I'll just do it because I think this club's great. And someone needs to just keep everything together, allow it to like flourish. The things that I've like tried to do with it, with like whatever like influence I have had, is just create like guardrails for the club, for the group, so that you have like really organic growth within people, and within like people just opening up and people going out of their comfort zone in this group, which I've learned really attaches people to whatever
Yeah.
club. If they spend any amount of pain for a group, like that will give them meaning for that group. I think it was a lot of what, cult leaders actually, like religion, they have sacrifice and everything for that reason. But I don't think it's for our club, for our sake, but we're getting people to get up, deliver a speech that they feel passionate about, and sharing something about themselves. It puts them outside their comfort zone. Well, they're growing, and that discomfort is drawing to them to the group. And I don't think it's bad. And that's kind of what I've from this group, from being like president and trying to like come up with some light policies just to create the group dynamic that I think we should have. Yeah, it's kind of made me more attached to it. And I like experiments. And I feel like our club can be an experiment in so many ways. With as officers, we can create rules and see how that will change the club and the group dynamics. But then in the same way as like if you're a speaker, you get to try out a new style, experiment with it with no repercussions if it doesn't go as well as you wanted, but like upside if it does. As an officer, I think there's been a little bit of like, oh, allowed me to experiment a little bit more with just what I find interesting. Like I do find group dynamics interesting. And so it's allowed me to like be in a place where I could do something, which is, so it's been fun. And then also the result of like a really cool group of people has also been rewarding.
Well, and I would venture to say, as somebody who has experienced your leadership, that you've made lots of great changes. We have such a positive culture. We have people who show up and can feel that in the first hour they're in the room with everybody. I do think what you've done will have a lasting impact on the club, which then, of course, just makes the club feel more tied to you and you feel more tied to the club.
Yeah, well, thanks. Well, I'm excited for you to be the new president, head honcho. I think you speak so well. So,
oh, thanks, Brendan. That's the joy, right? We both got to watch each other hone in on this skill.
yeah.
So I'm going to close this out, but I have one question for you to close it out. If there was anybody out here who's listening to this and has wanted to join some sort of club, whether it's Toastmasters or some other kind of like organized club, I don't know about you. I thought about joining Toastmasters for months before I showed up to my first meeting. It felt so intimidating. Do you have any advice for anybody who's been thinking about joining some sort of kind of more formal organization?
Just go, just try it out. If you go there, you don't like it, then, you can just leave. Next time, find another one. There will be another group organization that you'll find and that you'll like a lot. But then it ends up, you never know what happens when you kind of step through the door. I think of it where our club, it's kind of a sneaky entrance to get in. It's kind of like we have to put up a bunch of signs to let people know, oh, this is how you get to our meeting. So it goes from outside those doors, it's so quiet, and you would never know there's a group or kind of like a club with as much energy as ours close by. Then you go through the doors, and all of a sudden it's this cool, vibrant group of people, and you find yourself in it, and you're like, oh, this is really healthy for me. I should do this. And then 4 years later, they're talking about it on a podcast with someone who also made the same decision that same day.
And now we just keep going back. Brendan, thank you so much for coming on here, for chatting about this. And, I'll see you tomorrow because we both have speeches to give. We're both speaking tomorrow.
Okay, so now that you've listened to this whole episode, I have something to admit to you, which is that since Brendan and I recorded this episode, I did not renew my Toastmasters membership after 4 years in the club. And as you heard in the episode, I actually was supposed to be president next year. I'm over here, like, not my finest moment, if I'm being honest. But I also think that maybe it was one of my most honest moments. Let me explain. I realized that I could show up and I could be president. And would that be good for the group? In some sense, yes, because I'd be filling this role. Somebody's got to do it. But I also realized that I don't think it would be good for the group because the last year I was showing up to the meetings, but I wasn't fully partaking. Like, this is the thing about formal community is it's really only engaging and positive, I think, if you're actually partaking in the structures and the meetings and the goals, right? A formal community is all about a shared goal. And I wasn't really doing that. I wasn't preparing my speeches or doing the investment I needed in the group, like outside of our meetings. I would just show up, honestly, kind of unprepared. Now, the reason for this is a mix of work and the health stuff that I've been going through. And it just so happened that Toastmasters kept falling further and further down the list. Like, I took a break for a few months. And during that time, I decided that it was officially time to let Toastmasters go, at least for the time being. But the thing about a formal community is when you've invested something like 4 years, like I had, you'll always have this sense of I belong here. Like, at any point, I could join again. I could go in and I would have this sense of confidence of how to show up and the people who might be there and what my night is going to look like. There are so many people in that group that I consider familiar friends, people that I have really enjoyed getting to know. And so although it's not part of my weekly schedule every Thursday night anymore, I have such fond memories. We don't have to keep going in the same formal community forever for it to be valuable in our lives. So if that's something that's holding you back, I'd go give it a try because even a few months or a few years might be worth it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Friendship IRL. I am so honored to have these conversations with you, but don't let the chat die here. Send me a voice message. I created a special website just to chat with you. You can find it at alex.chat. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle @it's Alex Alexander, or go ahead and leave a review wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. Now, if you want to take this conversation a step further, send this episode to a friend. Tell them you found it interesting and use what we just talked about as a conversation starter the next time you and your friend hang out. No need for a teary goodbye. I'll be back with a new episode next week.